Soon after the sun reaches its summer solstice, a quiet Alaskan river hosts one of nature's most iconic scenes. Hundreds of thousands of salmon surge upstream from the ocean to the river and beyond. They're guided by an instinct to spawn at their birthplace or die trying. About 60 miles from the ocean, they'll encounter a waterfall where they are greeted by some of the world's largest bears. Brown bears gather at Brooks River in Katmai National Park, motivated by the profound hunger that comes only after months of hibernation. With the arrival of salmon, we'll have the opportunity to reflect upon the fish's importance to people and wildlife. We'll witness the challenges that bears face while competing for fishing spots. We'll see the devotion and fierceness of mother bears. We'll watch the growing pains experienced by newly weaned bears, and much, much more. Those are some of the stories we'll discuss today as we welcome you to the 2025 Bear Cam season, brought to you by Explore.org, Katmai National Park, and the Katmai Conservancy. Hi, everyone. I'm Mike Fitz, your resident naturalist with Explore.org, the world's largest live nature cam network. Bears and salmon live in a world of change and competition where individuality, resilience, and adaptation become keys to their success. And I'll be joining you this summer on the Bear Cams along with my co-hosts. First, allow me to introduce Katmai National Park Ranger Sarah Bruce. Sarah, welcome back to Bear Cam.
Oh man, I'm so excited for the Bear Cam season this summer. Yeah, my name is Sarah. I've worked for Brooks, Katmai National Park for a couple of years. I was a Brooks Camp seasonal in 2019 and 2020. I've lived in the Bristol Bay region now for almost 6 years and have participated in a lot of community events. And I came back to the park in 2024. So this is my second season doing Bear Cam programming. I'm really excited about it. This year, I actually have two rangers to help me out. And the first one I'll introduce is Ashley, who's on the chat with us today.
Hi, everyone. My name's Ashley. This is my first season working at Katmai National Park. This is also my first time in Alaska ever. I have previously worked in Grand Teton National Park, spent a lot of time exploring Grand Teton and Yellowstone. Last summer, I was at the fee booth at Moran Entrance Station, so if you passed through last year, you may recognize me. I was also lucky enough to work a summer in Glacier National Park. That's me at Virginia Falls. I've held a lot of different jobs in the parks, but this one feels truly extra special to me. Getting to live alongside these beautiful wild animals, bears, wolves, lynx, porcupines, salmon, moose, all of the birds that migrate to Katmai every year. It has me feeling truly honored, and I'm very excited to be here.
Thanks, Ashley. We're excited you're here too. Our other ranger this year is Christine, and we have a little video clip from her.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ranger Christine, and I'm here at Katmai National Park and Preserve. And I'm very excited to be here. I've always wanted to work at this national park. It's a beautiful park with plenty to see. We have bears, we have geology, we have amazing water everywhere. And originally, I'm from Yosemite National Park. I've worked there for many years, and that's a very exciting park as well. But this is one park I've always wanted to work at, and I'm excited to see this magical place come alive this summer. So hopefully you'll tune in to see some of the bears along with other things as well. And we're looking forward to seeing you.
Events, but she'll be back soon for the rest of our programs.
Well, I'm looking forward to working with our park ranger partners, and Ashley and Christine are going to be our eyes on the ground at Brooks Camp this year. So they will have some very valuable perspectives to share with us because they can see a lot of things maybe that the cameras can't see. Our last co-host today that we'll introduce, though, is recognizable to a lot of our longtime Bear Camp fans. Naomi Boak is with the Katmai Conservancy. And Naomi, I know you have been anticipating the arrival of the bears for months.
I have. I'm just like everybody else out there, and probably some rangers too. But yeah, it's very exciting that things are going to start in about an hour. It's very exciting. So for me, in 2014, I was a television producer, and I also became one of you. I was a Bear Cam fan and watching the Bear Cams instead of watching television or reading a book. And after watching the Bears for 6 years, in 2019, I became a ranger at Katmai. And what a privilege, and how great to share those experiences. And since last year, I've been working for the Katmai Conservancy remotely from my home in New England. And occasionally I might be joined by someone else in my household, Bark Ranger Pink. So right now she's staring up at me wanting treats, but hopefully she won't interrupt this live chat, which I'm really looking forward to. So to get us started, Mike, Katmai and the Brooks River are pretty remote places, which is one of the reasons all of us are so excited to work there and help you understand this very special place. Can you tell us more about the location of Katmai National Park and Preserve and the Brooks River?
Yeah, we definitely need to. The cams, I should remind everybody, are going live in less than an hour, so stay tuned for that. But we do want to introduce you to Katmai and Brooks River specifically because through the bear cams, we get to travel to one of the most intact and wildest ecosystems in North America. Sarah, we were just talking about that the other day, about how that's one of the things that makes Katmai such a special place.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Katmai National Park is in Southwest Alaska. It has a couple of different biomes and ecosystems within it. We've got tundra and taiga and boreal forest. And so it's just a very special place. It's super remote. Not a lot of people live outside in the gateway communities of King Salmon and Naknek. But we sure do love that we have some cameras out along the Brooks River. So there are a couple of spots where the cameras are on the Brooks River. The Brooks River is about 1.5 miles long with the falls sitting right in the middle. It creates a natural barrier for salmon to stop up their migration, and that's where bears love to feast on them. A little bit ways down from our falls camera is the riffles, where that's a great bear viewing area. You can see a lot of different parts of the river, including the falls. And then as you make your way down river, you can see the bridge in this overview here. And we have a couple of different spots on the bridge on both sides and an underwater camera. So we've got a lot to view here in the boreal forest of Brooks Camp. And it's exciting to see how things are going to play out this year.
In Brooks River too. Sorry, go ahead.
Mike, so sorry.
All right, no problem. I was going to jump in and say that Brooks River is is special for so many different reasons, and it's also been home to people for several thousand years. And I was thinking about this earlier today. There might be, few places on Earth as small as Brooks River that have mattered to as many people over such a long period of time. Because Brooks River is only, again, a mile and a half long. It's like 3 kilometers if you stretch it out, and you're being generous in your measurements. So in this context, like the national park and the bear cams are really only a blink in history. Yet that blink allows us to share the river with the world. And a little bit of a history on the bear cams. Explode.org partnered with the National Park Service at Katmai in 2012, and the bear cams went live that July. If my memory serves correct, the bear cams were so popular that Explode.org had to purchase extra server capacity to handle the volume of watchers almost as soon as the cams launched. And then I joined the bear cam community in 2013 when we began experimenting with online programming. Since then, tens of millions of people from nearly every country on Earth have watched bears at Katmai through the cams. I believe that webcams coupled with programming and commentary from experts like our rangers in Naomi represent a future wave of nature-based experiences where we can use technology to help build stewardship for wild creatures and wild places. And I personally, and I know my co-hosts here, remain humbled by the opportunity to talk with thousands of people around the world every day. It is a situation that we do not want to take, or an opportunity we do not want to take for granted. So no matter how you experience Brooks River, whether you're one of the fortunate who can visit in person or one of the millions who share a unique wildlife watching experience through the webcams, your personal experience at Brooks River as a physical place would not be what it is today without healthy runs of salmon. So let's start there. Sarah, as we look ahead to the summer at Brooks River, let's talk about one of the main pillars of Katmai's ecosystem.
Yeah, the salmon, they are so important to the area of Bristol Bay, Katmai National Park. They really are the foundation and the keystone species of this area. If you tuned into any of our live chats last year, you know that I'm one of the biggest fans of salmon. They are the lifeblood of this community, and they are ecosystem drivers here. We have a good understanding of how the salmon keep the ecosystem and the community thriving through their migration out to the ocean and back up into freshwater river and lake systems. But Ashley, can you tell us more about how salmon and bears, how salmon are important to bears and the ecosystem as a whole?
Yeah, absolutely. So salmon are very important to the bears here. It's a very nutrient dense food that helps them fatten up for hibernation. It's a concentrated food source in Brooks Camp, so when the salmon are running, the bears can eat so much of it that they don't really have to eat much else. They will eat other things because not only are they opportunistic hunters and feeders, but when they are in that state of hyperphagia, they're getting ready for hibernation. All they can think about is food. Typically, they aren't going to be too picky, but they want that salmon primarily because it's going to provide that hearty fat and those nutrients they need for the winter. And salmon continue to feed bears throughout the summer and into the fall. Dead and dying salmon that lie in the river after peak fishing season in July will continue to serve as food sources for those bears as they're looking for every last calorie they can eat. The salmon are considered a keystone species, so that means that their presence here shapes the ecosystem as a whole in a huge way. And bears aren't the only ones benefiting from the salmon during the summer months. Lots of other animals need to prepare for a long, cold winter. So as you can see in this clip, there's a wolf fishing at the lip of the falls. Salmon provide fat and nutrients for all those other animals as well. So when you're viewing bears fishing at the falls or at the river, you may see these other animals too. Not just wolves, but also gulls, eagles, osprey, ravens, lots of other ones. And carcasses in and along the river throughout the summer also supply nutrients to the soil and water. So anything not eaten is over time absorbed back into the earth. And salmon accumulate a lot of nutrients from their time spent in the ocean. So all that stuff that they're accumulating when they die in Brooks Camp, that's absorbed back into our soil and our water here. And salmon have also been an important resource for humans as well. So we recognize that indigenous people have a 9,000 plus year history living in and using the area traditionally known as Kittavik, which is what we call Brooks Camp today. So before permanent structures were established here, the land was used as a seasonal fish camp for Yupik and Sugpiaq people. So even after the 1912 Novarupta eruption and the establishment of Katmai National Park and Preserve, natives have resettled in other areas on the peninsula. So that includes nearby Naknek and South Naknek. There is a family with deep ties to the land that still uses Kittavik, and to this day, salmon are amongst a variety of crucial resources from the land that Yupik and Sugpiaq people rely on. So while we're talking about the significance of the salmon run, how it benefits the ecosystem here at Katmai, Naomi, I would love to hear about this year's salmon run forecast. What do you know so far, and how does it compare to last year?
Well, we're going to start with the great news that sockeye salmon have been seen in the Brooks River already. Ranger Keith actually caught the first one, I think, a week ago. So that's really good news because in 2023, the salmon came a little later than we're used to seeing them in July. So good news. They're what we consider normal average time. So when we talk about forecasts, unfortunately, there's no specific forecast for the Brooks River, but the Alaska Department of Fish and Game does forecast how many sockeye salmon they expect to see in larger Bristol Bay and then in the Naknek watershed. And Brooks River is a part of that watershed. And the forecast for this year is well over 50 million salmon with an escapement of 14 million. So that's considered a really strong run, and which is good. The escapement is how many salmon will travel beyond the bay into spawning habitat, which Lake Brooks and the Brooks River is one of those. So this is so there will be future generations of salmon, and not all the salmon are caught for human consumption. And the prediction for the Naknek watershed is 1.1 million sockeye. Since the Brooks River is part of that watershed, there are other rivers that are also part of Naknek, but Brooks River only sees a fraction of that 1.1 million salmon predicted run. And there are many factors that can affect the size of the run into the river. How many young salmon survive to return to their spawning grounds in the Brooks River, how many of the fish headed to the Brooks were caught in Bristol Bay or the Naknek River. And in 2024, the escapement for the Brooks River really decreased from a peak in 2020. And here you see the relationship between number of salmon and number of bears in the river. And so we'll be looking to see how that works out this season with both the number of salmon and the number of bears. But with all that said, it should be a good year for the bears. And fingers crossed, we'd like to see fat bears at the end of the season. So Sarah, I just mentioned a couple things that could affect the salmon run in the Brooks River, but really, what are the many things that could affect a salmon run?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that can affect the salmon run. There's certainly a lot of threats in the area that could have a lot of effects on the salmon run. Katmai has a lot of things to boast about, and one in particular that drives the rest of the park and all of the things that we get to see and be witness to is the intact ecosystem in this area. The plants and animals around Katmai have existed in this way since the last ice age. There's been very little development impacting the ecosystem, as opposed to the lower 48, where the development of highways, cities, resource extraction, and resource exploitation has diminished intact ecosystems. The native people of this area have been living as a part of the ecosystem since time immemorial. That mindset of being a part of the ecosystem has kept this place functioning and sustainable. Human threats to development around the area and the warming of the planet are affecting the intact ecosystem that is in place. Here you can see all of the anadromous salmon streams. Anadromous fish are fish that are born in freshwater and then migrate to the ocean and back. Everything you see in red is a salmon stream, and the green there is the outline of the entirety of Katmai National Park and Preserve. And the earth is warming. As oceans warm, they become more acidic and lose their oxygen levels. Salmon are incredibly susceptible and sensitive to changes in their environment. Acidic oceans create a pH increase or in pH imbalances that ocean life has not adapted to, and they're not suited for large swings in pH levels in the ocean. We know that salmon drive the whole ecosystem. And it's some of those threats to this place can really cause detrimental effects to the salmon population. One of the most iconic users of the salmon in the area, besides the human history of using salmon, is bear use of salmon. So, Mike, let's learn about the different bears on the river and how they use this concentrated food source.
Certainly, I think that's the subject on everyone's minds, right? Salmon are essential to the survival of Katmai's ecosystems as we know them, but there is no bear cam without salmon. But with salmon in the river, we are treated to one of the world's greatest wildlife spectacles. So let's talk specifically about the bears of Brooks River. Watching them here is special because we know the bears as individuals. They are adaptable, competitive, hungry, resilient, and individualistic in their personalities. We see a wide spectrum of sociability, tendencies to explore, and risk-taking or risk avoidance. We see them grow from cubs into adults. We see them mature into elders, and we see mother bears face many challenges in order to raise and nurture their cubs. On that last point, Ashley, to me, a mother bear represents devotion and sacrifice. I think we're going to get to see a lot of examples of that this summer on the bear camps. And bear families are always one of our main storylines during the summer. Oh, I think you might be muted, Ashley.
Yep, sorry about that. Newbie. Bear families are some of the most recognizable bears along the Brooks River for sure. You may see mother bears walking around with spring cubs of the year or koi, or young bears between 1 and 2 years old called yearlings. On average, we see mother bears with 1 to even 4 cubs. Typically, these family groups are the first bears we see arriving at Brooks Camp in the spring. And it's pretty incredible to see bears along the Brooks River teaching their cubs how to hunt, fish, play, and eventually be able to survive on their own. So, Sarah, can you tell us more about bears with first-year cubs?
Oh yeah, it's always exciting to see first-year cubs on the river. You'll hear us call them koi, like Ashley said, which is cub of the year, or you may hear us refer to them as springers, which means spring cubs. And they may or may not be the most adorable bears on the river. They're certainly one of my favorites to watch. It's fun to watch how the female bears teach their cubs and watch the cubs stumble through their first year of life. We see them often up at the falls and riffles. We see them in the lower river, especially. We like to call the lower river almost the nursery for these bears, where there's less threats of males and dominant males who may be trying to not be so nice to females with cubs. But we certainly see some of the female bears kind of pushing the limits up at the falls and bring their cubs of the year there. Life is difficult for cubs. They have no idea how to be a bear yet. The first few years of life are crucial for these cubs to learn to survive. But Naomi, how do older cubs differ from these spring cubs?
Yeah, I love how you just describe the learning process. And to me, I'm always surprised at how fast they learn and how much they mimic mom
Oh, yeah.
in so many ways. But so yearlings, the second season, normally brook sows keep their cubs for a second season and only through the second season. And yearlings grow increasingly independent as they learn how to fish for themselves and they become more adventurous, although I'll put adventurous in quotes because they're still under the protection of mom. But in recent years, it's very interesting. We've seen more and more sows keeping cubs for a third season. And we're not quite sure why this is, and maybe that's something for Mike Fitz to ponder for us. But 128 Grazer is a great example of that, and you see that here. Her large gang, and I'll call them a gang, with her 3.5-year-olds, were a powerful force in the river. And really, who would want to mess with them? I mean, you wouldn't want to mess with Grazer, but Grazer with two 3.5-year-olds? So this certainly gives advantages to the cubs. They have continued protection from their mother, potentially more and better access to food sources. But the disadvantage for the mom is that the longer she keeps her cubs, the fewer litters she will have. But cubs don't stay with mom forever, Mike. What happens next?
Well, I think we're going to find out with several bear families this year. I want to focus just on one at the beginning because these bears are fairly recognizable. So even as we see the cubs become independent bears, we should be able to recognize those cubs as they come back to Brooks River. And the bears I'm talking about are the 910 clan from last year. So this consists of the mother, number 910, and her biological cub born in 2022, and her adopted niece born in 2021. They gave us the rare opportunity to learn about the behavior of a blended bear family with an adopted cub. This year, however, the 910 clan is beginning a new chapter in their lives. 910 is returning to life as a single bear, while her cubs are navigating life on their own for the very first time. So this is just a normal part of bear life. It's family breakup. It's the process by which mother bears and their cubs separate. It normally happens in late spring and coincides with the bear's mating season. In fact, the return of a mother bear's estrus cycle is the likely trigger that sparks separation. At this time, mother may become intolerant of her cubs, or an adult male might sense that she could be receptive to mating. The presence of an adult male showing interest in mom, and then mom not displaying overt wariness toward the male, often sends the message to the cubs that maybe it's time for them to become independent bears. So what does this mean for them? For mother, I suspect the event is less consequential than it is for her offspring. Mom experiences a hormonal transition, so her body is changing. She's feeling different things as she enters estrus and gains the attention of amorous male bears. This is nothing new for her, but for her cubs, breakup represents a significant change. They aren't cubs anymore. Biologically, we can call them subadult bears, and more to the point, they're now equivalent to human teenagers. So they're experiencing a great deal of change. They're challenged to survive on their own, and they can sometimes face turmoil in their lives. Sarah, I'm not sure if we're going to see any subadults on the camera today, but we're just a little over a half hour before the cameras go live for the year. But that subadult journey is always fascinating to watch. It's one of exploration and challenge as a bear establishes its place within bear society. And it's not easy for them to adapt to this change.
Definitely not. When you have the protection of a sow, I think that gives young bears confidence when they're still with a sow, so that if another bear is challenging that family group in the hierarchy or something, they really have that protection of the sow. Where when they're on their own, they don't have that protection and they can get knocked down the hierarchy very quickly. We often see subadults grouping up together so that they have some sort of feeling of protection with these other young bears. Like Mike said, subadults are the teenagers of the bear world. They're separated from their sow and they're figuring out how to be a bear on their own. We mentioned that cubs will typically separate after their second winter in the den, but yeah, we have been seeing some of these sows keep their cubs for longer. We didn't have a ton of subadults on the river last year, but the one that we did have that showed up time and time again was 519, and she certainly enamored me during Fat Bear Week last year, where you could really just see how she grew up and just really filled out a different sort of like skeletal structure. She certainly is more lanky, like a teenager is, and her facial features have really shaped up a little bit. She's a typical example of a subadult. She separated at 2.5 years old and was set up well to survive the winter on her own. I'm excited to see if she comes back this year and see how she fares as the second year on her own. There's not a ton of subadults on the river this year, but we may be gaining a few more with the 910 family separating. Mike, who else might we see as a subadult on the river this year?
Well, right. Yeah. I mean, I think there is the potential for a lot of subadult bears to show up. So over the next few years, young bears will make decisions about the best places to find food, to seek shelter, where to hibernate. This is a process of learning and exploration for them. Establishing a home range, for example, is usually a multi-year process. For example, for male subadults, they often slowly expand their wanderings until finding a home range, until they find a home range that lies outside of the area where they grew up with mom. In contrast, female bears like 909 Junior and 910 usually create a home range that overlaps with their mothers. So for bears that were raised as cubs in the Brooks River area, we're more likely to see females than males return to the river. And all adult bears went through this transition, but that doesn't mean the current adult bears care about the plight of subadults. They're just another competitor on the river. So staying mom, as Sarah mentioned, brought cubs a lot of advantages. Now they experience greater difficulty and hardship at the bottom of the hierarchy. So we certainly, I think we can see, maybe expect to see 910 Junior and 909 Junior show up as independent bears. 909's Junior's experience this summer probably will be very similar to her cousins, her younger cousin, although it might differ since she's a year older and presumably a little more mature, at least in body size. Still, that won't exempt her from the risks and growing pains of subadulthood. And I focused on the 910 cubs again because they should be recognizable if they return to the river. But as many as 12, I had to go through our list from last year and count, but as many as 12 2.5-year-old and 3.5-year-old cubs were seen on the river last year. This is 482 Brett and her two giant 3.5-year-olds from just last year. They are likely to separate from their mothers and become independent bears. And that's on top of at least 6 yearling cubs in 2024 who are now 2.5 years old, which also is an age when brown bears frequently separate from their mothers. And that's in addition to any other subadult bears like 519 who will be returned to the river but aren't yet old enough to be considered an adult. So this could be another sub-adult summer when the rambunctious and curious nature of teenage bears is on full display. Mom was their protector, their provider, their teacher, and they learned a lot from their experiences with mother, but they also have a lot more to learn and discover. So for adult female bears, such as 910 or 132 or 504 or number 94, hopefully one of those bears will show up, or more will show up on the cams today when they go live in just about a half hour. But life as a single bear brings, I think, for these females, especially these former and future mothers, it brings a freedom that they don't experience with cubs, Naomi. Yet we also know that a summer without cubs for these female bears is a time of preparation and growth.
Yeah. We see many different types of single female bears on the river. We see young bears, like you've described, who have not yet had cubs. We see sows on their own, taking a break between litters, sometimes a year, sometimes 2 years between litters. And we also see older sows who are no longer able to produce cubs on the river. So it's quite an age range of females who are older than subadults, but and don't have any cubs. But one bear I'd like to focus on is bear 901. We all, who doesn't love 901? She arrived at the Brooks River this year without cubs. She was fat enough to have cubs last year, but we don't know if maybe she lost a cub or two before she arrived at the river. We never know what happens to bears before they arrive at the river. But what that means for her this year is that she's freer to roam the river. She can choose her preferred fishing spots. And for 901, she's a beachcomber. She likes to fish along the beach of the Naknek Lake. And she can also get a lot fatter because taking care of cubs takes a lot of energy. A sow with cubs has to produce a lot of high-fat milk to nurse her cubs. She has to have energy to corral them and keep them safe. And she has to feed herself to keep herself healthy. So being single and fancy-free, we might say, gives a single female the ability to fatten up, and that prepares her for becoming pregnant in the den because uh, brown bear sows do not become pregnant unless they're fat enough to sustain a pregnancy. So we're hoping that 901 will have a pregnancy. We know she'll get fat. I mean, if you just looked at her when she almost won Fat Bear Week. So I have a lot of confidence in single 901. So, Mike, what other kinds of bear interactions could we see on the river?
Well, one of my favorite stories to follow, of course, is the hierarchy. All bears, whether they're single females or the largest adult males or their families with first-year cubs or their young subadults, they got to navigate the competition posed by other bears. And sometimes that means avoiding other bears in time or using spaces where they are less likely to encounter more dominant bears. So that's one way that you can kind of slot yourself into the hierarchy. It's just, not really overtly take part in the interactions, at Brooks Falls. But, you could also have these big adult males in contrast that might never make an effort to avoid other bears. So at Brooks River, and particularly Brooks Falls, bears many of them choose to seek confrontation in order to get access to productive fishing spots. It's one of the best places in the world, Naomi, to see the development of a hierarchy among wild brown bears.
It's my favorite thing to observe, I think, is the dynamics of the hierarchy. And it usually doesn't stay static. Even in the years when 856 was the dominant bear on the river for so long, he was challenged. So the primary goal for bears out of hibernation is to get as fat as possible for their next hibernation. And that means eating more, moving less, and avoiding injuries that might hinder their success. And so most brown and grizzly bears forage and fish under less crowded circumstances than we see at Brooks. But at Brooks, it's a crowded river. And if bears want to feast on the many salmon available in the river, they need to share the space. And hierarchy lets them do that. It's a system that establishes a pecking order and avoids many fights, not all, and also can avoid serious injury once a hierarchy is established. So in a monarchy, the hierarchy is inherited, but at Brooks River, the hierarchy is earned. So Ashley, can you tell us some more about the hierarchy?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, this is kind of reiterating what Mike and Naomi have said, but when thinking about the 4 million acres that Katmai encompasses, the Brooks Camp corridor is relatively small. And the concentration of food and resources here is very dense, and there are a lot of bears here that all want the same things. Bears are focused on survival year-round, so competition is really high for them to succeed in hunting, and also to raise young, to find a desirable mate, get ready for winter, and protect themselves from injuries. But there are definitely advantages to being at the top of that hierarchy. For bears at the top, this can mean they get their pick of a prime fishing spot. Some bears prefer to fish from the top of the falls, some bears prefer fishing below the falls, in the center of the river, some create their own unique spots. But a prime fishing spot for a bear could mean both that there is a high concentration of fish moving through that area, kind of like what we see at the falls with those salmon getting held back by the falls themselves, and that spot accommodates how that particular bear prefers to fish. So every bear has adapted or will adapt to their own style of fishing that allows them to be successful. So one example is that we've seen bear 747 fishing primarily below the falls, and that works for him. Other bears have developed techniques for successfully fishing at the lip of the falls, but yeah, it really depends on what works for that bear and what's going to allow them to get the most fish. And the hierarchy creates tolerance and understanding between bears. since every bear then pretty much knows their place, unless they seek to change it and challenge a more dominant bear. Conflicts may arise when competing for mates or fishing spots, or when a mother bear is defending their cubs, but in general, you can very well see 50 bears all grouped at the falls and not fighting at all, which is pretty crazy. But some bears actually do take advantage of being lower down in the hierarchy too. Some older bears want to avoid conflict as much as possible, so for them, being lower down in the hierarchy means being in a safer and less competitive spot. Conflicts definitely can still arise, but typically they strategically set themselves lower down to avoid conflict as much as possible. In general, a top bear in the hierarchy means having the size, strength, assertiveness, and confidence to survive and thrive. A bear knowing their place amongst the other bears, whether it's higher or lower in the hierarchy, can be crucial to bear success and survival. So, in speaking about the hierarchy, Mike, what are your predictions or expectations for what the hierarchy will look like this summer?
There's a lot to think about. Let's first consider what the upper level of the hierarchy looked like in 2024. It was no surprise that the largest males, such as 747 and Chunk, were the most dominant bears. Again, they're the biggest bears on the river. Very few others will even think about approaching them, let alone challenging them. And then we also saw a bear 856, who was the river's most dominant bear formerly, take a step back. We watched younger adult males grow in stature and assertiveness, and all those things hold implications for the hierarchy this year. So let's look at how we might see the hierarchy take shape. We know that the biggest and most assertive bears will be best positioned to rank at or near the top. That's typically adult males. We don't know who that might be, or even whether there will be a single most dominant bear. And as Naomi said earlier, rank in the bear hierarchy is earned. So the one thing that I can predict is that this is a summer of change within the hierarchy. And with that sort of background in mind, there is one thing that I'm fairly confident of right now, and that is that Bear 32, who's nicknamed Chunk, will be especially challenged to maintain his high level of dominance because he has a broken jaw. So we don't know how he was injured, although I suspect his jaw was broken in a fight with another bear. Sometimes bears lock jaws as they fight. They grab on each other, they pull and twist, and that can result in broken bones. And this is the peak of the brown bear mating season right now. And some of the most vicious fights among bears occur between males fighting over access to mating opportunities. This is actually footage from Chunk just like 2 or 3 days ago, something like that. We were testing the cameras, making sure that they were working at the time. And lo and behold, Chunk shows up in the river, hot day, wanted to cool down, but also maybe looking for a little bit of relief for that broken jaw. And when he yawned right there, you can really easily see that the left side of, or excuse me, the right the right side of his jaw there, since it's reversed in my image, is just snapped off. So he still has an intact left canine, but the other side of the front part of his jaw is just snapped right there. A lot of people have been wondering about Chunk after word spread of his injury. Many of you wrote in advance to ask about him. So for example, Denise wrote in and Denise asked bluntly, is Chunk okay? No, he's not, to be equally blunt. It's a significant injury, and it's causing him pain now and will result in a permanent disability for him. So he faces a difficult summer. Another related question came in from Terry, who wrote, do you think Chunk will be lower in the hierarchy because of his injury? And if so, who's your guess as to who the top bear will be? Given that Chunk's jaw is broken, he can't compete with other large males with the same vigor that he did last year. He likely knows that he risks further and more severe injuries if he does that, while other bears will likely sense his weaknesses. So he's disadvantaged in that way. However, Chunk remains a huge bear. His body size alone means that he will rank amongst the most dominant bears in the river, and that's a great advantage for him. Regardless of his fate, in my opinion, he remains a successful bear. He's achieved that success through his dominance. He's had ample access to lots of food. Until now, he's experienced pretty good health from what we could observe, and he's likely had plenty of mating opportunities. And if you're a big male bear like that, that's important to you. There might be many mini Chunks running around Katmai. So he'll need all his skills, though, this year, his adaptability and his resilience to heal and get fat. So I can't answer the second part of Terry's question until we see more bears gathering and interacting at Brooks River. But some of the younger adult males appear to be primed to use their growth and size and strength to earn a high rank. So 164, who many Bear Cam viewers know as Bucky, became a giant last year, and he's not even 10 years old. So by the end of last summer, we saw him competing with 747 for some of the same fishing spots. And 747 is a giant of a bear. So to see a young bear like that basically standing up to 747 was quite impressive. And then another one that I keep telling people to watch is 503, sometimes known as Cub Adult. He's another young male. He's finally gaining the body mass to fill in his tall frame. So here he is on the left, watching Chunk walk away after Chunk directly approached him. I bet we could see the reverse of this situation this summer with Chunk deferring to 503. And then there are other male bears to watch as well, like 151 Walker. He's not young, but he's big and well positioned to remain dominant. And then there are the next generation of younger male bears, others that I haven't mentioned, 208, 602, 903, 907, among others. Any one of them might showcase the ability to achieve dominance this year. And one final point, I know I've been rambling for a little bit, but there's also no rule among bears that forces them into a linear stair-step hierarchy, ending with one hyper-dominant bear. With so many opportunities available and so many bears with the size and the skills to become dominant, we might witness a very fluid hierarchy this summer. And Naomi, yeah, you mentioned it. I mentioned it. We love watching the hierarchy because it's a display of strength and resilience and competition. It has a lot of implications for a bear's health and survival and reproductive success. Those facets of the hierarchy apply to female bears as readily as it does to males. And female bears, they don't have a separate hierarchy from the males. They are essentially a part of it.
Yeah, there are definitely some female bears who sit high in the hierarchy. And the best example is the 128 grazer. I mean, she gets the fishing spots she wants with or without cubs. I mean, she used to be a little more dominant when she's with cubs because she is defending them so fiercely. I don't count her out at any time. She is a fearless bear. And but the other part of the hierarchy are those bears that may not be competing as much. Subadults really know their place very quickly, and they say they back off. And the falls, as was mentioned before, can be a dangerous place for a family group, and especially sows with spring cubs. So many of them avoid the falls altogether and therefore are really not competing in the hierarchy. And they tend to fish in places like the riffles or the lower rivers. So when you're watching the cams, the falls is not the only place for great bear viewing. And so they're really not jockeying for a position in the hierarchy. They're finding a niche where they can safely protect their young as well as feed themselves. So Sarah, we've talked about all these different ages and kinds of bears. How do bears make their living on the river?
Yeah, it's easy to think of the Brooks River as where the bears are, but it's really the bears that are following the salmon run. So if we look back at the Naknek watershed here on the left of the screen, you can see two red lines kind of heading into this greenish, grayish, bluish body of water, which is known as Kvichak Bay, part of the larger Bristol Bay area. And there's that one red stream that comes all the way up into Naknek Lake. There's been a lot of bears seen around Naknek and king salmon, and they will continue to follow the salmon upstream through Naknek Lake until they eventually start making their way up the Brooks River. Bears follow the salmon upstream in order to make their living and get fat enough. The peak is in July. The salmon peak is in July. So the bear peak is also in July. The salmon after the July season will start to move upriver after they get over the falls into other salmon streams around Lake Brooks. And then the salmon will also continue to go further upstream in Naknek Lake up to places like Margot, and they'll eventually make their way into various other lakes in the Naknek drainage. So in August, we typically see bears not using the Brooks River as often because there's not as many salmon in the Brooks River as there is in July. we see those bears returning back to the Brooks River in fall in September because of the spawned out salmon that have spawned out and died upstream, and the salmon carcasses are now floating downstream back towards Naknek Lake. So we typically see a lot of bears in July, few bears in August, and then more bears in September. We've seen more bears hanging around in August in the past few years than we used to see. Mike, do you have any ideas maybe why we're seeing that, or what's your speculation?
Yeah, I don't know. That's the short answer. But when I was working at Katmai, we saw a few bears at Brooks River during August, and I can remember times when would go days in a row without seeing any bears, and that was a historical pattern essentially, until like 2016 at least. In the early years of Bear Cam 2, we were often lucky to see one bear like a day in the middle of August, and people get really excited when like the bear nicknamed Ted would hang around for more than a day. But in 2016, 2017, we started to see bears remaining at Brooks River through the month of August to fish. And it's happened every year since. And I've wondered that, Sarah, like, why is this? Are we seeing a temporary deviation from the norm? I used to think that, but it's continued for long enough now that I think we're seeing a long-term shift in the pattern of bear and salmon activity at the river. I don't have an explanation for why sockeye salmon are migrating through the river later in summer. The result is a lot more bears at the river in August. So it's kind of good for people because we have a longer amount of time to watch the bears. And that appears to be the new normal now. Bears fishing at Brooks Falls every day in summer. So it's a change that we're experiencing and witnessing along the river. We're witnessing how the bears are opportunists and they're adapted to survive changing conditions. They take advantage of abundant food. So if there's going to be food available in August for them at Brooks River, hey, for some bears, there's no reason to leave. And we tend to think of them as gluttons, but in reality, they're driven by this instinct to eat and eat and eat because they don't eat in winter. So for survival for them means getting fat, Sarah, because we know that for bears, winter arrives quickly in Katmai.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a break in our regularly scheduled program because a little miss decided to join me on my lap. So if you guys see her more on camera, I'm so sorry. She's attached to me at the hip. But yeah, bears are working super hard all summer so that they can survive hibernation. Hibernation, we often think of it as bears going to sleep for the winter, but it's more of a state of torpor. Their metabolic rate drops, their heart rate drops. They're not totally asleep per se. They definitely take a lot of rest, but they stop eating and they're living off of those fat stores that they accumulated all summer long. And I often think about like, why are they going through this cycle where they are up and moving and eating all that they can throughout the summer, and then they just go back into hibernation. You know, there's so many other places on the planet where they could make a living year round, they could eat year round. But the concentrated food source, the amount of salmon and the amount of fat that they get in Alaska just sets them up so well to be able to survive the harsh Alaska winters with very little physical movement throughout the winter. Bears are an important ecosystem driver just as much as the salmon. They feed other wildlife from their food scraps. They bring salmon on land so that the salmon can feed the trees. So they're doing this cycle of being awake, eating as much fat and salmon as they can, and then going back into hibernation in the winter as a means to help the ecosystem continue to function. So hibernation plays a really important role in the overall health of the environment and ecosystem where bear populations are, like Katmai National Park and other places in Alaska as well. Oh man, we've thrown a lot of information in a very short amount of time. I think the cams go live here in like 8 minutes. So before we wrap up and get you all on the cameras, let's learn more from Ashley about visiting the Brooks River area specifically.
Yeah, so the first thing you'll do when you arrive here at Brooks Camp is attend a bear safety orientation. Those bear safety orientations cover the rules of Brooks Camp. So you'll learn about proper food and gear storage, what do you do if you encounter bears on trails and pathways, guidance for safe bear and wildlife viewing, layout of Brooks Camp, and so much more. They only last about 15 to 20 minutes. They are mandatory for new and returning visitors, but this is to prioritize visitor safety and the safety of bears and other wildlife. When we're at Brooks Camp, it's important to remember that we're coexisting with a lot of wild animals, and we want to respect them as we're viewing their natural processes here. And another bonus, if that hasn't enticed you enough, is that you do get a fun pin, and we change the design every year. So that's pretty fun. You do also get to instantly meet one of our wonderful rangers on our interpretive team here. In some other parks, visitors may spend their entire time never getting to see or meet a ranger, but here at Brooks Camp, you get to meet one right away. So consider this ranger a friendly face to have around camp, a helpful resource in case you have any questions or concerns. You're going to learn their name, you're going to learn their face. They may lead your culture walk later, they may lead your valley tour later, so you'll see them around. So get to know them. And in case you're curious, even us rangers get that bear safety orientation. I thought going into it that I was already prepped to live in bear country because I've spent years in Wyoming and Montana. But there are different and more specific rules that apply to Brooks Camp. So it's all important to know, regardless of if you've lived around bears or visited bear concentrated spots before. As a newbie, I was really happy and excited to learn how to better coexist with the wildlife here, and even the returners appreciated the refresher. So it's all good information whether you visited or not. And I'm sure everyone is curious about what it's like going to the falls. So this will happen maybe after your bear safety orientation. You're excited to walk over to the falls platform. When the salmon are running, the falls is a great place to see bear activity at its finest and definitely in abundance, especially if you're visiting in July. But if you are visiting in July, just prepare for a wait at the falls viewing platform. So during peak busy times, a ranger will be there with a wait list, and you can add your name to that list, and then that ranger will call you when the time is available for you and your group. So there is another viewing platform nearby, though, called the Riffles platform, as we've mentioned before. This also offers a view of the falls, and it doesn't have a time limit. So this is another good option for folks who want to see bears at the falls, but maybe are working with a time constraint. This is your view from the Riffles platform. So it's good to note that if you are bringing a long fixed lens to get those awesome bear photos, the Riffles platform would actually maybe be better if you have that kind of gear, since if you go to the main falls platform with that long fixed lens, you may be getting a picture of a bear claw and not much else. It's pretty close. So consider if you're working with time constraints or if you're working with certain gear, that Riffles platform may actually be better for what you're looking to do. And just a reminder to take a moment, even when you're photographing a lot of those bears, to step back from the lens every once in a while. I know you want to all get those awesome pictures, and trust me, so do I, but it's important to step back from that lens and really take a moment to appreciate what you're witnessing and how awesome it is that we get to see these bears at Katmai. And if you're visiting in August or September, there is still great bear viewing. It may just look a little bit different than what you might see in July, because that's along the time when bears disperse along the river. So, regardless of whenever you visit, just pack some patience with your travel essentials and leave the expectations behind. Maybe you never know what you're going to see here, but chances are you're probably going to see something remarkable either way. And then just a note on etiquette to respect the space of fellow bear viewers on the platforms and on the bridge, and also to respect the bears themselves. When you're on the walkways, just remember to continue walking, because some of the bears that are more shy around people will use those opportunities to pass under those walkways. Those bears expect that people are not going to be clustered on those walkways, and that's a safe spot for them to cross. So it's important that we respect bear spaces for sure, and don't hang any cameras in their faces over the railings or anything like that. And then I do want to touch on some points about accessibility real fast. So we did get a question from Vicky. So it says, we're going to be at Brooks Falls in July and are traveling with an injured person who can't walk much. What are our best options to see bears, then sit, then get back up again? Are there any wheelchairs there to rent or borrow? So this is an awesome question. There are wheelchairs for free that you can use. They're stationed both at the visitor center and at the falls platform. There is wheelchair access to the bridge, the elevated walkways, and the viewing platforms themselves. It is important to note that in between the bridge and the falls trail area, there is dirt trails and it's pretty hilly in some spots. It's about a mile walk from the bridge at the south side to the falls viewing platforms. So just think about, what's going to make you the most comfortable, what's going to make you feel the safest when you have to maybe get off the trail to let a bear come through. Just think about what's going to work for you in those instances. And also remember that going to the falls platform is not necessary for bear viewing. There's plenty of bear viewing all around camp. So you can see bears at the bridge. You can see bears when you're hanging out in camp. It doesn't have to be at the falls platform. There is wheelchair access at Three Forks Visitor Center as well if you choose to go out to the Valley 10,000 Smokes. The UCAC Falls Trail is not super wheelchair friendly because it is very steep and contains a lot of switchbacks and uneven terrain. But it's important to note that while you're on the bus and at the visitor center, that's when your interpretive tour is going to be taking place. So even if you can't do the UCAC Falls Trail, you're not going to be missing out on the programming. And then, so while we're talking about accessibility, we're reminded that Katmai is for everyone, whether you visit in person or watch the cams online. One way we can all celebrate Katmai's bears every year is by participating in Fat Bear Week. So Mike, do you want to introduce us to Fat Bear Week?
Well, due to time, I would love to, but I think we're going to skip our Fat Bear Week section right now because Naomi, you were right. I was wrong before. You said, I think we might, what happens if we go too long? Well, I said, we're not going to go too long, and here we are. So I will admit
so are we going to lose everyone to the cams? I won't be hurt if you guys leave us for the cams, but it is that time. It's noon in Alaska. What's happening, Mike?
Yeah, so the cams are going live basically any second now. So we will talk about Fat Bear Week later in the summer, but we want to wrap up and thank everybody for joining us today. Before we go, however, there are many ways that you can get involved in the camp community. So you can sit back and watch if you want to, and that's perfectly fine. You can comment in the chats on exploded.org or on YouTube about what you see. You can take snapshots on exploded.org, which is a great way to archive your experience. There's a wiki that is maintained by a dedicated group of Bear Camp fans. A ton of information on there. You can ask us questions in advance through Ask Your Bear Camp Question. That's a Google form that I set up, and you can ask a moderator for the link for that, or find it in the partner tab at the bottom side of any of the Bear Camp pages on explode.org. And then also you can help organizations that support national parks and wild spaces, such as the Katmai Conservancy, right, Naomi?
Yes, I mean, I received so many questions from everyone this year about how to support the park, and you're supporting the Katmai Conservancy is a great way to do that. Your donations and the financial support from Explore enable the Conservancy to do so many things for the park, provide funding for interpretive rangers and the bear management team, numerous scientific projects around Katmai, teams that analyze the health of the water, Dr. Michael Saxton's research on bats and bears, or, these are just a couple of examples of of how the Conservancy supports the park. And the Conservancy also supports the park's relationship with the many indigenous communities surrounding Katmai. So if you want to help Katmai National Park and its resources, supporting the Katmai Conservancy is one good way to do that. And Sarah, I think you have a brief announcement for everyone.
Yes, it is about the new version of the Bear book. It is coming. It's not here yet. The physical thing it's on a hard drive. It's coming to me in King Salmon, and it is currently stuck in Anchorage. But as soon as I get it, I will put it up on the Katmai website. I'll share it on social media, and I'll be sure to put it in the explore.org chat as well on the Falls camera. So it is coming. We have it, just a little bit longer of a wait before we can release it for all of you to see and enjoy.
Well, stay tuned for more BearCam live events this year. We have many already scheduled. We hope you'll join us for weekly live events and play-by-plays and Q&As in the comments. You can check the schedule in the calendar on the bottom left side of any live cam page on explore.org. And this is a list of some of our upcoming live chats. So don't forget to visit Katmai National Park's website at nps.gov/KATM for official information from the National Park Service. Visit katmaiconservancy.org to learn more about their work. And I want to thank the cam ops, the chat moderators, the explore.org staff who helped to support me and my work. And of course, thanks to the Katmai Conservancy and our rangers who are joining us on the bear cams this summer. And then a special thanks to my co-hosts, Sarah Bruce, Ashley, and Naomi Boak. Great to speak with all of you again today, and I'm looking forward to a great bear cam season with you. And with all that being said, let's go watch some bears, everybody.
Yeah,
right?
bears.
Yeah.
It's time for bears.
So bears and salmon, they live in a world of change and competition. Individuality, resilience, and adaptation are keys to their success. Look for those stories. Look for those traits in the bears. It'll be on full display this summer. The cams are going live right now, everybody. Have a great day and happy bear watching.